RevOpsAF, the only podcast for people who are RevOpsAF and want to learn all about things that are RevOps AF.
Our goal is to give the revenue operations community, that includes marketing, sales, and CS for any of you not paying attention, the skills needed to accelerate their careers.
I'm your host, Matt Volm, CEO and co-founder of RevOps Co-op, a global community of RevOps folks from all across the globe. And on the RevOps AF podcast, we talk to people who are RevOps AF about things that are RevOps AF. And today we are with Aaron Bird, the CEO and co-founder of Inflection.io. Aaron is previously the CEO and founder of Visible, which I think got acquired by Marketo, and then y'all got acquired by Adobe. And so you've kind of been through the ringer there. And we're going to be talking all about how to harness the power of your data assets within your company. So a bit of a more kind of technical, kind of tactical sort of discussion, but super relevant and super important, especially given some of the things that Aaron and I were just talking about off mic, if you will, around AI and kind of technology. But Aaron, thank you for joining, my friend.
Yeah, that's great. I'm excited to chat. I feel like now that I think about it, this topic's really relevant because literally the last 15 years of my career, I started and ran a company called Visible, like you said. We sold it to Marketo, and at Visible, really all we did is we took all of your first-party data and stitched it together so that you could understand the buying journey and attribution and like what contributed to outcomes, for a marketing team, right? And at Marketo, obviously, data was critical to what people were using for marketing, and Inflection, and we'll get to it more, but Inflection, we help marketing teams operationalize kind of all their data assets. So I've really spent my whole career just helping companies basically use their data better. So excited to dive into this topic.
That's awesome. So before we dive into the data types, one question, because not every day, I guess, we get to talk to kind of founders, much less repeat founders. So before you started Visible, and actually, I don't know if Visible was the first company that you ever started, but what sort of, I don't know, what were you working on? What jobs did you have before you kind of wound up starting the company? And why do you start Visible? And then actually, why do you start Inflection.io as well?
Yeah. So I'll try to give you this short. There's like a very long version of my entrepreneurial journey.
We could talk for 30 minutes about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. The short version, I kind of always knew I've always been entrepreneurial. And so even like in 8th grade, I would like order pizzas to school and like sell slices to people who their parents had packed them a healthy lunch and they didn't want to eat it. Right.
All right. You're my kid's worst nightmare. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm sure it's going to come back to me once my kids get to middle school. Anyway, I like my whole, I had a paper out when I was 14 anyway, going on, but there's like all these examples of, I always kind of knew I was going to start a company. I went to college, undergrad for computer science, and started as an engineer. And so I worked for other companies for about 10 years before starting Visible, the last of which was at Microsoft. And I switched over to the product world at Microsoft. So I'd been an engineer and built software most of my career. I did a couple little startups on the side while I was working full time. I helped somebody launch a startup for about a year and a half, and I built the whole like e-commerce website and stuff like nights and weekends. So I did things like that. I actually started another company with Andy, one of the Visible co-founders, while I was at Microsoft, and just kind of, again, another side thing that was fun. So I've always kind of dabbled. I think a lot of entrepreneurs do that and kind of dabble before they jump. We actually had a first version of Visible that helped local companies, think like painters and photographers, people like that, find business online. So it was actually like a marketing platform for people who had like focused on our region. Like I sell something in Seattle and mostly services companies. We actually got, to revenue and customers, and then had problems scaling it because basically those SMBs really wanted to buy in person. They wanted to like talk to somebody. And it was really hard to scale that throughout the US. So we did that. And along the way, we built this awesome platform that was really driving business for these small businesses. It was actually really fun. But we had to prove it was working. So they would sign up with us. We took over their website. We took over their Yelp and like did all this stuff like in an automated way. And they were like, business is up, but how do I know it's you? So we actually built attribution hooking into QuickBooks to prove that this thing was working. And when we decided to pivot away from it, one of the things that we explored was to take our attribution engine and apply it to like broader B2B
Mm,
and not just local businesses. So anyway, that was how the first version of Visible was created. We also, selling our own SaaS product, we had a hard time with attribution. And so we felt the pain firsthand. And that's kind of what made us think like other companies, like B2B companies probably use this too. So um,
yeah.
anyway, that was kind of the incarnation. We did the other Visible for like a year and a half and then pivoted and it kind of was we're off to the races.
That's awesome. I love that because like you said, I think a lot of great products start that way, right? You kind of build something for yourself, or at least to solve a problem for yourself. And some version of that you realize has broader applicability. And you also kind of realize, hey, if I have this problem, then other people probably have this problem as well.
Yeah.
And I think it also kind of leads us into this data discussion that we're having, because like you said, to be able to put together, an attribution engine like that, you obviously had to understand a lot of really complicated elements of and moving pieces of data, right? So first, let's talk about some of the different data types that are out there, specifically first party and third party. Give us the definitions of each of those and maybe some examples for, I don't know, B2B companies, right?
Yeah, definitely. So first party data is just it's data that your organization has on its own or collects on its own that you own it. So an example of that would be like your website data, people coming to your website. Google Analytics would be one example. That's first party data. It's data that you collect and you own. And when I talk about first party data, you may not collect it today. So I think the other part of like this whole thing is thinking about what data could you get access to, both in first and third party, obviously. But that's first part. Your CRM data, obviously, that like you collect forms people fill out. This is all first party data that the business owns. And I think it's actually one of the most underappreciated data assets, and we'll get into that. But I think that like at Visible for attribution, all the data that we collected for attribution really was first party data for that company. We helped them collect it in ways that they may not have done before in the product that we built. But in the end, it was actually their data. They owned it, right? We didn't sell them data. We just sold them a way to better collect it and then stitch it together to understand buying journeys and attribute marketing to sales and revenue outcomes.
Yeah. So if those are examples of first party data, what's
Yeah.
third party data? What are some examples there?
Yeah. So third party data is data you typically buy, you get from a third party. So like ZoomInfo. If you do enrichment through Clearbit or ZoomInfo or something like that, that's third party data. You usually are buying it. Like there's some cases maybe where you're in a co-op or something, but most B2B companies are buying third party data. And usually it's for things like enrichment.
Okay. So I know you mentioned things like form fills, other stuff that's in your, CRM and other data that you're collecting. Talk about third-party data, things like ZoomInfo, Clearbit, like enrichment providers, right? That information can also probably be going into maybe your CRM, maybe other systems. So now you've got first-party data, third-party data, maybe all, I don't know, muddled or kind of coupled together. So obviously, like collecting data is step one, right? Whether it's first party or third party data. But like, where should you put it? How should you actually get
Yeah.
it set up? What do you do with it after you're like, okay, I'm going to buy this stuff over here and I'm going to start collecting this stuff over here. What's next?
Yeah, I would even say I like the philosophy when I build software of write the press release, start with the end goal in mind. So even just starting with that, okay, let's say it's, is it marketing or sales or customer success? Like which function are we talking and what do they need? What are they trying to accomplish? And starting there and then working back, and that'll help you determine like what data should we go buy or what data should we start collecting or pulling in that we don't have today. So I think working backwards from the end goal is key. I'll give like one example of that. We work with a lot of product-led growth companies at Inflection. So companies that have a product-led motion, meaning they have maybe a free trial or they have a freemium offering, or maybe they have a pay-as-you-go model that they try to like expand into like, big enterprise deals, things like this. And so a company typically in a company like that, you might start with, okay, we want our free to paid conversion rate to go up in this market segment, something like that, right? Like we're converting 30% of our free users every month or whatever it is. and we want that number to go up, but we think it could be higher. That's a classic example of data is very likely going to contribute to the solution there. And so then working backwards, like, okay, what is it? How are we getting people to upgrade today? How are we finding the right people to upgrade? How are we moving them through that buying journey so that they get to the key aha moment? And then are you collecting all the data you can to like help with that, right? And maybe you want to buy data too, like we see a lot of companies where in PLG where maybe people sign up with a Gmail address and you're like, oh, well, we have this huge group of people we don't know much about. Well, great. So let's enrich. Let's figure out who they are. Are they at a startup or are they at IBM? And you can do that by maybe looking up the Gmail address. You can even do that by looking at the IP address that they came from and doing RevIP to company and stuff like this. So it might be third-party data like that. Or it might be as simple as we need to instrument our product and figure out who are the people most likely to buy and how do we give them the right offers, or how do we get them in the next step in their buying journey and figure out where they got blocked and things like that. I think focusing on the outcome and then like working backwards and seeing like what data can help with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm always big on starting with the outcome that you're looking to drive, right? Like the end result, like you said, write the press release and then figure out like work backwards how you can actually solve that problem. Don't do it the opposite way because then you could wind up wasting a bunch of time, spending a bunch of money, investing in a lot of things that you don't need to invest in.
Right.
So we got a variety of different data types that can help us solve these problems, right? We've worked backwards, we've figured out what we actually need. Again, like we talk about like data unification, like kind of bringing this data together. Obviously, you can kind of pump or pipe some of this data into tools that you're already using, like your CRM, data warehouses, right? You got a bunch of different options. Like, what are the best practices around unifying and kind of bringing this data together so that we can take the next step of actually acting on it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that there's a big trend that we're seeing moving where the center of the universe for like, the single pane of glass or the one view of customers and prospects, et cetera, is moving from CRM to data warehouse. We're seeing this a lot, particularly in bigger companies. So if you work at a smaller company, you might be able to put all of your data in your CRM, whether it be like Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever. But as companies grow, those systems just aren't built to house everything that we're talking about. And so most companies end up migrating to a data warehouse where they have something like Snowflake or Redshift or BigQuery, and they start to put all of their data in there. And so that's what I would definitely encourage folks to do, maybe earlier than they have to, because it's the destination as companies grow with really no exception. And they typically build BI on top of that. So something like a Tableau or a Looker where you can visualize summarized views of that data, and then being able to put kind of all your functional apps to be able to send data into the data warehouse. And so that you've got one view. And then that brings up what you asked about, which is like, how do you put all this data together? And so having keys that you can use to bring data together, like a simple one is an email address, right? So Inflection has an email address in it, and Zendesk has an email address in it, and Salesforce has an email address in it, right? And so, okay, that's a key I can use to stitch together the marketing emails that come out of Inflection and maybe the customer support tickets in Zendesk and the SDR activities, out of Salesforce, right? And for things like accounts, bringing in like a domain or something where you said, I'm going to put the root domain in each of these systems, and that's going to then go into the data warehouse. And now I have a way to join across all of these. So you have to be intentional and think about, okay, what data am I bringing together? And what are the common keys for each of these that are going to exist in all these different systems? Being thoughtful about that up front goes a long way to help the data team to make things a lot easier. You just kind of start shoving stuff into Snowflake and then try to stitch it together later. Oftentimes you'll have to do like ETL processes to like reprocess it and all this kind of stuff. And if you can get it in there, at least, no one's data is perfectly clean, but with the idea of like how you're going to stitch them together. And again, like what are the goals and what are you trying to do with it? And what's that single pane of glass need to look like?
Yeah. So I know when we talked about data types, you brought up, right, like kind of work backwards, right? Start with the press release, knowing what you want to accomplish, and then make sure you're investing in the right things to help sort of get you there, right? I think that's one common mistake that people can make. So when we come to this notion of data unification, bringing things together in, say, a data warehouse. So you mentioned, right, like in a lot of cases, you got to get started with this before you think you might need to. So for folks that might be in that sort of situation, or maybe they've just started to kind of embark down this data warehouse journey, are there any common mistakes or gotchas? What are just some things that are going to be out there? They're going to be blockers, right, that people can avoid, right, by kind of thinking about things the right way at the beginning.
Yeah, taking the project in bite-sized chunks, which is probably good in general advice anyway. I see a lot of folks, once they realize they want to do this, then they start to say, okay, let's catalog all of our data and let's, do this big project for, unifying it all across all these common keys and everything. And the reality is, like, for the first end goal that you're trying to achieve, do you really need all of that? Do you know all those sources? So having add things over time. But again, what's the minimum viable product, if you will, for that like first goal, and what data sources do you need? And then as you do that, you'll learn, right? Like, and then as you add your next one and your next one after that. So I think that's key. I do think that, getting help is not a bad idea. Not everybody has the budget for it, obviously, but there are agencies out there and consultants that this is what they do if you don't have that kind of expertise in-house. The schema that you set up is important, and there's some good examples out on the web of like schemas you can use. I actually think this is a decent business opportunity for someone of just like the turnkey data warehouse setup with common apps kind of thing. I get this question a lot, but I think getting agencies involved or just reading up on kind of like how you want to set it up and picking and choosing the components that you need for this first, the first project.
Where does the other thing that came to mind and that I've heard a lot of people talk about is, and I guess this is probably applicable whether you have data warehouse or not, but it's having a common, call it data dictionary, or at least like a place where you have things documented of like what certain KPIs or data points mean. Where does that fit into the journey, at least across these first two steps that we talked about of like the different types of data and then unifying your data?
Yeah, it's a great point. When you look at organizations that have been at this for a while, this is one of those things that's kind of like tech debt. When you first go and create a data warehouse and add a few tables, everyone's going to be on the same page on what everything means because there's going to be very little data in there. As you add more and more, and you even see this, like, I think RevOps folks will relate, even just in Salesforce, right? What is revenue? Like, how do we measure it?
What's the right amount?
Is it ARR? Yeah, exactly. What's the right amount field? Is it ARR? Are we going to include ProServe? How do we do discounting? Right? Just a simple question of like, what was the number last quarter? Right? I could answer 5 different ways, God forbid, but probably there might even be more than one field in Salesforce to show all those things too. And so that just gets amplified because at least in the CRM, the schema's pretty defined, right? I mean, you can add fields and stuff, but there are common objects like opportunity and there is an amount on it and stuff like that. When you go to Snowflake, it's just a blank, you do your own tables. And of course, once you then start streaming in data from all these different sources, this gets amplified. So what is a user? What's a web session? What is revenue? So defining those things clearly and having staging tables, this is getting kind of in the weeds, but like you'll have staging tables that'll have the unblessed, if you will, version of revenue or whatever it is. And then you'll have like your blessed version of tables that people need to read from. And you might even have a data lake of unstructured data potentially too, depending on what all you've got. And so having good like segregation between those two and like, look, this is what's blessed. And that means there's only one revenue column in all of these tables and it all means the same thing. And we've cleaned it up on the way there, right? So I think definitions are important. Definitely when you build the BI layer and the visualization stuff on top, you want to make sure that you've got everything cleaned and you're only looking at those tables. It's a very important thing. And you can start with just a shared doc, right? These are the definitions. This is where they live and what tables. These other versions are not the same thing and ignore those. They're internal kind of sausage making on the data team side. So I do think that's critical. And a lot of teams don't do that. because it starts off simple and they feel like they don't need to, and then it gets complicated, and then now going and retrofitting that becomes hard. So yeah, it's a great call out, and it's definitely something you want to start from day one doing correctly.
Yeah, don't take a shortcut there, even though it might be the easy thing to skip over. Makes a lot of sense. So, all right, so let's assume we've got our first party, third party data figured out. We've unified things in the right way based on what you just said within our data warehouse. Things are segregated. We have our common definition kind of list, which we started from day one. How do we activate the data that we have? And I think today this is more important than ever because now you still have humans, right, who are using data and insights that the data provides. But we're now in the AI age again, where you can throw any sort of model at the data that you have and the data that you've been building and adding upon for the last how many years, right? That you're whether good, bad, clean, unclean, right? So how should folks be thinking about the activation stage and making sure that people can actually leverage the insights or that their technology can leverage the insights that they have? What are the best ways for people to do that?
Yeah. And this is where the final value actually gets delivered, right? You spend a lot of time getting the data in your data warehouse, and visualizing it only has so much value. The real value here is to activate it right back into the systems you're using in each of the functions of the business. So I think there's kind of two ways. So at Inflection, we think of ourselves as kind of this next wave of um, applications built for the modern data stack, right? And so if you have an application like Inflection, you can stream all of your data from the data warehouse into it and activate it there. If you're using something that's like maybe kind of the last generation of SaaS, then there's a way to bridge the gap with things like reverse ETL. So there's tools out there that'll let you kind of pick and choose data out of your data warehouse and send small signals to a SaaS application that maybe like can't handle all of the data, but at least you get some of it in, right? And so using like Salesforce as an example that we all know, you can't stream all your data warehouse data into Salesforce, and so you need to use something like a reverse ETL tool to then pick and choose. Okay, what is the summarized important stuff I'm going to send back into the CRM? There are some next generation CRMs I think that are embracing kind of the big data stack, but either way, depending on which tools you have, getting that data, being able to activate it is critical into the marketing or sales or finance or customer success, whatever function that is. The other thing that you mentioned is around LLMs. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about because I feel like we see every day we see bad examples of people using LLMs, particularly for marketing and sales. And every one of those, like one lens to look at it through is when you see something, ask yourself like, how much context, how much data about me and my company or whatever this is about did this LLM get before this thing was generated? And I think what you'll find is that in every example where it's really bad and it looks like you look at it, you're like, oh, this is unpersonalized. This was obviously generated by ChatGPT and like blah, blah, blah. It's because there's not a lot of context, right? It's like they're sending you something without giving it all of the data that was needed and all the context that was needed. And then I think the flip side is true. Like, we see examples too where people, I've gotten communications where I'm like, wow, this is just so tailored that I wonder if a human wrote it or if they actually like fed really great data to an LLM.
Yeah.
And so I think, and this really all comes back to once you get all that great data in the data warehouse, you want to use it for, the kind of the quintessential example is outbound, right? Don't do outbound unless you've just got the perfect data set, right? Because I mean, people are going to ignore it and it's going to not be good for your brand and everything, right?
Yeah. So we talked about, again, like the activation step is that last step. And actually you talked about the new age sort of products like Inflection, where you can pipe any and everything from your data warehouse into your product. The old, or I guess called the prior version of SaaS applications, where you have to kind of pick and choose and use another provider to be able to do that. So I guess my question for you is, if we're making this transition from like the old way to the new way. But if you're still in sales or marketing or customer success, you're part of this functional team that is responsible for activating or acting on the data that you get. Is it fair to expect them to now know how to actually act on all this new data that we provide them? And like, should they be the ones to actually have complete control over that? Or should we actually have a model where it's still the data team who acts as like I don't know, the translation, right? Where if you're marketing, sales, CS, you're like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. This is the thing I'm trying to act on. Here's the data that I want to be able to see to help me do that. I don't know, how should we think about that? Is it fair to expect functional, like folks, like I said, marketing, sales, CS, to now just be given all of this brand new stuff without any context or maybe training, right? And just be like, yeah, like here it all is, right? This is what you've been asking for all along. Like, go do what you want to do. How do we, like, what's the best way to approach that or like bridge that transition?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it goes back to the thing you mentioned earlier around having a vocabulary and having
Yeah.
like defined data sets that are approved or that are the canonical versions. And that starts with the data team. And obviously it's a bridge between the functional owner that understands the business and the concepts of what they're trying to do, and then the data team who actually understands like how all this data is laid out and where it comes from, and working together to say, okay, this is the common, this is what this means, this is where it's coming from. And it kind of going back to like this blessed view, if you will, where the data team has made sure that all of that is the right vocabulary, the right sources, the right revenue number, everything else. And then also that the business team, whatever function that is, that they know what those things mean, right? And that they're all on the same page with it. So I think getting to that, like this meeting of the minds, like here's your marketing data set and here's what it all means and here's how you can do things with it, and then sales and customer success, et cetera. Once you have that, now activating it is, I think, in the hands of the functional owners now because they understand what they're using and what they're looking at. But it's not something that happens overnight and it's not something that's free. So, I mean, it is an exercise working closely with a data team. Just like take like a marketing and marketing ops working together to make sure that like campaigns run effectively, right? It's the same kind of thing, having a good relationship with the data team and like making sure that you've got clear communication on what, how do I get the things I need? But I do think it's important that you unlock it for that team, right? So there is this meeting of the minds that needs to happen, and a kind of a blessed schema that everyone understands what all the things mean. But what you don't want is to force each of the functional teams to have to go to the data team every time they need something.
Yeah.
Right? That is broken, right? And we see that a lot, particularly as people are coming on this journey, right? I need this one thing. I need this one thing. It's like, no, you want to make sure you've got a more holistic view and you're enabling and not just solving a ticket based one problem at a time. And that's true for everyone, right? The data team doesn't want to have someone knock on their door like for every little thing. And then, the customer success team or whoever it is also wants to be able to just operate independently. And hopefully you're only going back when it's like there's something new, right? Like we added a new piece to our stack, or we got something else that's new that we now need to like have another meeting of the minds of like how we're going to incorporate this. But then once they've done that, then they're off and running.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I guess for you all at Inflection, marketers are, I guess, the end user of your product, right? So have you seen them kind of embrace the new data access, if you will, that you've kind of enabled them to do and just kind of dive in head first and take ownership over it?
Yeah, we definitely have. And it starts with the process you talked about. Oftentimes marketing teams come to us with a problem. I want to go do X, Y, and Z. I know we have the data to do that in the organization. Oftentimes they've seen it in Power BI or Tableau or something, and they know it exists, but they can't action off of it, right? So they start with that problem. And the next step is like, okay, let's go understand that data, right? Because they haven't gone through that process yet usually. And so even in pre-sales, we'll meet with like the data team, and it's almost like we introduce the data team to the marketing team sometimes. So that whole exploration of like, okay, what do we have? How do we harness it? And that's important. But yes, the key though is once you've gone through that exercise, that it is unlocked, right? And that now you have kind of like self-service ability to go do what you need. So yes, that's definitely part of the
Yeah.
whole process when we onboard marketing teams.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right. So I've got two more questions for you. They are not data related, nor are they RevOps related. So I'm going to put you on the spot here because I didn't give you any prep beforehand on
Okay.
this. So first question, right? So you're building Inflection.io right now. You mentioned living in the Seattle area. So when you're not company building and doing things at Inflection, you shut the computer for the day. What are you doing? What are you passionate about? What keeps you busy after the laptop's closed?
Sure, yeah. I've got two young kids, so like hanging with them. I like to like work out, ski, things like that.
Yeah.
Do a little bit of fly fishing every now and then.
Oh, nice. Very nice. All right. Yeah, Pacific Northwest is a good place for that. And then last question. So we're hosting RevOpsAF 2025 in New Orleans in May of next year. I know you guys also run PLGTM conference as well. So to kind of paint the picture for you here, let's say whether it's RevOpsAF or PLGTM, you got, the main stage. For us, it would be 300, 350 people in the audience. And let's say you're speaking, right? So you're walking up now to stage, everyone's cheering you on. They're super excited to see your presentation and your talk. What would be your walk-on song? What music would you play as you walked on stage to a screaming crowd ready to kind of hear you speak?
Geez, I don't know. You're putting me on the spot here. Yeah, I kind of want to do some 90s rap, but it
Yeah.
does depend on the audience, you know. That
Yeah.
would be like my walkout music. Maybe like a early Biggie song or something.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah, maybe Rolling Stones, like if I wanted to be a little less controversial.
Yeah. Hey, we're for everyone in RevOps, we're very controversial, right?
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, let's go 90s rap then.
Yeah. 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 There you go. Yeah. East Coast versus West Coast.
Right, yeah,
I love
exactly.
it. That's awesome. Well, thank you very much, my friend, for dropping some knowledge on us today all around all things data. I very much appreciate it. With that, I will let you run. I'll see you again. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt.
Keep it RevOpsAF.
For more great content like this, join our community at RevOpsCoop.com and check out the links provided in the show notes.